wow, how can we be so near the end? You may be thinking, I wish it was over. I don't know. But for me, it has been interesting. So what is your impression of the book thus far?
Encouraging.
Encouraging?
Sobering.
Sobering?
Fascinating.
Fascinating. That it is. Is it, I'm just curious, compared to what you knew before we started this class, have any of your impressions of it changed?
Gain new insight.
You're gaining new insight, okay? Why is that?
Well, just depending on the time of life when I read it, it's like every other part of the Bible. The older I get, and the more life I live, the more some of the struggles and the trials and overcoming those things, and where that overcoming comes from. Sometimes it's us doing the hard work and admitting what we've done wrong. Sometimes it's God working things out.
Yeah.
So the older I get and the more I see those things, the more revelation makes sense to me, because I can see the great quality of struggle. That struggle is so valuable in our life and in our relationship with God.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things in that are spot on here.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I think remember, I had a couple of goals when we started this. Do you feel like you know what the text says? Right. Do you feel like you're grasping it and becoming familiar with it? The second one was to learn lessons from it. Do you feel like that you are learning lessons from it? And the third one is to kind of take some of the mystery out of it. It's not, I don't want to belittle those who've gone before, because I think there is a certain conceit in our day and time that we have arrived and we know better than anybody has ever known before, and that all the people who went before us were all idiots, or had some kind of bias in the way they thought that didn't let them see things the way they really are. It's also possible that we have some bias and we don't really see things the way they really are. But I do think that we've overcomplicated it. Go back to the very beginning of the class when we first started talking about this. How long do you think Smyrna had to read this letter? And physically had it in their possession? Right? Before it moved on to Pergamum. And I believe that they grasped it. Because what their expectation was that every time I need to know something, it will tell me what it is I need to know. What did I just see? What does that mean? And I think as we're going through it, and one thing that's really struck me as we go through and we see the seals and the trumpets and the bowls, there's always an explanation section after it. Now, we may have some questions about the explanation, but the heart of what that explanation means is clear. So, for example, we got down after the sixth seal and we wondered, why are we going to suffer? And there's an explanation. The dragon lost the war. That was Satan. He got thrown out of heaven down to the earth. He's mad. He's after the church, but God won't let him destroy the church. But now he's after everybody individually. And we're even told who those people are. Those are the ones that keep the commands of Jesus and keep his testimony. That's, So if you're wondering why we're in this great struggle, and you wonder why you're being persecuted, We just told you. Oh, by the way, Satan isn't going to do it himself. He's going to give his power to a beast. And everyone's going to have to worship that beast. And that beast is even going to have his own beast. And so you're going to have three powerful things working against you. Satan and the people he's given authority to, or the symbols that he's given authority to. And there are giveaways in there about who he might be talking about, because there's always this, who's like the beast? And I also think that one of the things I've really learned in this is that we're supposed to be really knowledgeable of the Old Testament. You ever heard anyone say, we're the New Testament church, the Old Testament doesn't matter? How in the world could you understand this book if you had no knowledge of the Old Testament? It's not even possible. And specifically, you better know what God said in Daniel 7, because that's the key to this book. It points to the fourth kingdom, and that fourth kingdom is going to make war against the saints. And these poor people in Asia Minor, guess what is come to pass? The fourth kingdom is making war on the church. And they're right in the crosshairs. Now, I'm not completely satisfied with this in my own head, but I think that pattern repeats. What I don't think is ever repeated is that when the fourth kingdom fell, there's never been a worldwide power like Rome again. We might go, oh, well, what about Britain? Well, Britain wasn't stomping and trying to do all the things that are described here. Britain wasn't trying to destroy the church. And up to this point, we haven't been trying to destroy the church, but there have been other powers like Germany, Nazi Germany, that did, but they were against everything that wasn't Nazi, right? And they didn't last for a long time. But I would say we should be wise as serpents and realize that those patterns can repeat. And that we will always see times when the church is really strong, when the church doesn't seem to be doing well, and that it'll have to be revived. So, and we might be in one of those times. Might be. Okay. So someone read from chapter 16, verses 17 through 19 for me. Chapter 16, verses 17 through 19.
Then the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air, and a loud voice came out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, "It is done." And there were noises, and thundering, and lightning, and there was a great earthquake, such a mighty great earthquake as had not occurred since men were on the earth. Now the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon was remembered before God to give her the cup of wine, of the fierceness of his wrath.
Yes, so perhaps John had a few questions in his mind. We do. What is Babylon the Great? What is the great city? Now, we've heard about Babylon a couple of times during the trumpet judgments. In 14 verse 8, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. Then here in 16:19, I think there's an interesting contrast here. Babylon makes the world drink the wine of her sexual immorality. God in his judgment will make Babylon drink the wine of his wrath. Boy, there's an Old Testament, I hate this word, echo, but shadow here, that in the prophets, Isaiah spoke of such a thing as God making Israel drink the wine of his wrath. And boy, it wasn't just Israel, it was Egypt and Tyre and Babylon, and you could go down Edom. He's going to do, when God punishes, it's the cup of the wine of his wrath. Okay? Now, John's wondering, well, who is this? So chapters 17 through 19 really reveal who Babylon is, that what will happen to Babylon, what is the wine of the cup of God's wrath. And chapter 19 brings us really to a completion about Babylon, that we see the saints rejoicing over the fall of Babylon the Great. So, let's go into chapter 17, and let's read that together. It's about 14 verses, I think, or 18. Okay, here we go. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came to me and said, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of those whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." So the first thing you should note here, as we are told what this vision is about, we are told that this is the judgment of the great prostitute. Okay? "And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. You ever heard that before? 7 heads, 10 horns? The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus." By the way, just one thing to keep in mind. How do we know the people of God in Revelation? What do they have on their forehead? His seal, his name. The high priest wore a turban with a gold piece that said, "Holy to the Lord," which identified him as being for the Lord. We have the people of God have that on their forehead. Those who worship the beast have that on their forehead. Now we come to this great prostitute, and who she is on her forehead. Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. When I saw her, I marveled greatly, but the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel?" Maybe the question would be here, wondered. "I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her." Oh, good, I'm going to find out who it is. "The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. The 7 heads are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. One is, the other is not yet come, and when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. It's clear now, right? We move on to chapter 16. So, what does the angel say he will show to John?
The judgment of the prostitute.
Judgment of the prostitute. Where is the great prostitute sitting?
On a scarlet beast.
Okay, on many waters, on a scarlet beast. Who are the clients of the great prostitute?
Kings of the earth.
Kings of the earth. What does the great prostitute ride?
The beast.
The beast, right? How is the beast described?
The 7 heads and 10 horns.
Oh yeah, we've heard that before, right? I think we know which beast it is. What is the prostitute, or how's the prostitute dressed?
In purple and scarlet with gold and jewels.
Yeah, okay. What is the prostitute holding?
Golden cup.
A golden cup. What's in the golden cup?
Filthiness of the fornication and abomination.
Yeah, okay. What his title is on the head of the prostitute?
Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations.
Yeah. And with what is the prostitute made drunk?
The blood of martyrs.
Yeah, the blood of God's people. What's John's reaction to seeing the prostitute? Marveled, right? What does the angel ask John? Why are you marveling? What is the angel going to do for John? This is a distinct feature of apocalyptic literature.
It's going to tell him the mystery.
I'm going to explain this to you. Who is the beast? From 11:7, you should know this. Didn't know I was going to make it work.
Is it Satan or the servant of Satan?
It's a servant of Satan, right? He is the one that came out of the sea. We have kind of a reference to that here as well. Where is the beast going?
Destruction.
Destruction. That's important. Chapter 11 said, the beast that rises from the bottomless pit. And we've been told he will rise from the bottomless pit, but he is going to destruction. But the woman is riding him. Riding him. Who will marvel at the beast? Yes, but specifically,
The king of the servant.
well, everyone whose name has not been written in the book of life. Now, we've been told earlier that those who have the mark of the beast and his mark on their forehead, those who worship the image of the beast, names are not written in the book of life. So, we can assume from this then that everyone who marvels at the beast are those who worship the beast. Okay? So, we're getting deep enough in this that we have to think back to things that we've seen before. What do the 7 heads of the beast represent?
Kings.
Kings, and there's a dual meaning here. The angel tells us that.
5 that fall in one.
Well, 7 hills and 7 kings, right? Which is a clue. What are the 10 kings of one mind to do?
Give the power and authority to the beast.
Yes, okay. Against whom will the kings, the beast, and the prostitute wage war? The lamb, okay. By implication, if they're waging war on the lamb, who else is getting? What are we? We are the body of Christ. If there's a war on the lamb, there's a war on us, right? What are the waters?
Multitude of peoples.
Yeah, it's like all the nations. So it tells us this beast has control over all that. And what will the 10 horns do to the prostitute? Seems a little tough here to follow, but what will they do?
Devour her.
Yeah, they're going to turn on her. And who put it in the minds of the horns to destroy her?
God.
God. You always have to look behind the scenes who's really going to fix this problem. So who is the prostitute?
The great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth.
Yes. Well, that seems to kind of hone it in. And everybody argues about this. Okay. I don't know why, but we'll come back to that. What do the 8 kings represent? Now, remember, now we're in interpretation. Remember, everything in Revelation is symbolic language. It has a meaning. If you're trying to sit down and figure out, do I start with Julius Caesar or with Augustus, stop it. Stop it. What does this mean? What is the symbolism here? By the way, there are others that try to backdate it to popes. So, what do you think it means?
The war of good and evil.
Pardon?
The war of good and evil.
Okay, war of good and evil. But remember, how long will God and Jesus reign? Forever. Each of these kings, how long will they reign? Yeah, 5 are already dead. What does that tell you?
No, they won't reign forever, that's for sure.
They won't reign forever. So whatever situation you're in will change. But these are not permanent. They don't really have the staying power of God and the Lamb. Now, do they have power? Yeah. They can be a real pain. So, but here's what I think we should take away from it. You know, there are 5 are already gone, and there are 7 total, and then there's one that's 8 that's of the beast. And here's what you should realize. These kings that he's talking about, they are the ones that have power and authority from Satan, and they are one with the beast. Okay? And so all you need to take from that is they are all one with the beast, but they're not going to last forever. Just like the beast is not going to last forever. We've already been told that the beast is going where?
Destruction.
To destruction, right? So what is the point of this vision?
God's will be done.
Okay, we're waiting on God's will to be done. So here's one view, and I kind of ascribe to this. All evil men who fail to recognize the authority of God are destined to the identical end. God will bring them down from their perch on high and cast them into the lake of fire. They will not endure for long, even though it may at times seem so. That is John's message to the 7 churches. This is bad. I realize how bad it is, but it cannot and will not last forever. Because when they make war on the Lamb, who's going to win?
The Lamb.
Right. Now, think about this. There's going to be this war. What happens in war? Even to the good side. Death, right? We've been told all the way through this, here is a call for the endurance of the saints. Some are going to go into captivity. Some are going to be slain. But you need to hold on to the commandments of Jesus and your faith in Him. Don't give in. Because the view, remember, we have a view from heaven and a view from earth. Blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Where will they be? We've already seen it, chapter 15. They'll be around the sea of glass, singing the song of Moses and the Lamb, which means they're going to see Pharaoh's army destroyed. And they will be victorious. The mind of a Christian is, where is victory realized? And have God does not see things like we see it. Dying is not the end. Dying is actually being in eternity. That's what we need to be focused on. Now, this prostitute, she's a piece of work, right? She has brought the whole world under her control by seducing people, by seducing these kings. They're willing to give up their power to her because of what they gain from her. And what they gain from her is economic prosperity and peace. Now, someone has described Roman peace as the absence of resistance because they killed them all. You know, that was Roman peace. As long as you do it our way, you have peace. But you know, we've seen this thing. There's been 4 world kingdoms. There's been a lot of upheaval for a long time. There was Assyria, but then we got the 4 that Daniel talks about. Babylon, Medo-Persian, Greece. Greece broke up. Rome came to power. There was stability. And when you have stability, you have better economic progress than you had before. So with that in mind, let's look at chapter 18. And this describes the fall of Babylon and people's reaction to it, or the world's reaction to it. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, what we've already heard before, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. Just so you understand, he's not talking about what will happen afterwards, but he's saying Babylon is fallen because they're full of uncleanness. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning, since in her heart she says, I sat as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. For this reason her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots and slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas for the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels and pearls, for in a single hour all his wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and whose trade is on the sea, stood afar off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned and crying out, Alas, alas for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth, for in a single hour she has been laid waste. Now note the tone change. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon the great city be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. And the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. And the light of the lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints, and of all who have been slain on the earth. This is a lament. If you are familiar with, say, Isaiah 13, or Ezekiel 26 through 28, or Nahum the 3rd chapter, you would recognize that these kinds of laments were prophesied about Babylon, about Assyria, about Tyre. And in fact, most of this is a compilation of those Old Testament scriptures. A good example is found in verse 7. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart she says, I sat as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. That's taken directly from Isaiah 47, and it's speaking of the physical Babylon. Babylon did not believe she could fall. All you need to do is go back and read Roman literature and believe they didn't think they could either at the height of their empire. They did not. And so, let's do a little, I'm going to jump ahead to interpretation, but there are a couple of things I do want you to notice. There are refrains in this. How fast will be her fall? In an hour or a single day. The point is not a literal hour, not a single day, but what it means is it's certain. It's going to happen. Because in the eyes of God, and you can look in Psalm 90 or 2 Peter 3, one day is 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is one day. In His mind, it's done. It's done. And in the span of eternity, it's done. Even before it happens. So, let's think about this just for a minute here on interpretation. What does sexual immorality represent in this vision?
False religion.
Okay, false religion. That's one of them. There's another one here.
Economic gain regardless of consequences.
Economic gain regardless of consequences. As long as I get what the money, I'm okay with what's going on. What would be a temptation for Christians in a world where if you don't worship the beast, you don't get to participate in commerce? Compromise. Because honestly, if you're not allowed to participate, what would go through your head? I can tell you, all of us, we lose our job, what's the first thing we think about? I always thought, man, how soon do the refrigerator box come? You know, how soon will I be living under an overpass? You know, and it's not like that, but that's how we tend to think about things. And so, before we're too judgmental about them in the first century, we ought to realize, how do we do with it? Would I be tempted to compromise on something to keep my job? After all, you do have to get along in this world. So you might not be as willing to worship the beast, but if your future depended on it, you might, right? Well, these kings of the earth, they're doing the same thing. All the merchants are doing the same thing. I want to be able to sell to Rome. When I was in Russia a few years ago, one of the things that struck me was people told me that under communism, and probably still to a great deal, they would work in a plant and make something, but the entire shipment would go to Moscow. Because the capital city, we don't live in a situation like that yet, but it's getting close, where everything goes to the capital. So Rome was a place of incredible wealth and decadence. They had more money, and eventually it contributed to an internal rot. As they got wealthier, they got lazier. That's something to keep in mind. Okay, so sexual immorality, I would say, is accommodating the culture for my own benefit. Okay? Yes?
A couple of things that are interesting with Babylon that it's easy to just kind of look over, but when you look at what's happening here, it's almost like she's a rival church, right? You can come in, we've got religion, we've got worship, you can have all this kind of things, and the image of Babylon, the reason this is picked up is because of Genesis, back in 11. And what's so interesting about this is that's the time where the nations rejected God and they wanted to make a name for themselves and have prosperity and work together and all of that. It's the same picture And yet God is saying now, hey, you don't want me? Well, that place is full of demons now. And that's what the nations sought after. And instead of you like piling up your wealth up into the heavens, like there in verse 5,
You're
your
piling
sins,
up your sins. Yeah.
your sins are, it's not a name for you. Your name is just adultery and fornication and all of these same ideas.
And so I would ask you to remember one thing, and then I've got a question for you. This answers the question, by the way, of chapter 6, 9 through 11, when the saints under the altar asked, how long until you avenge us? Because here's the vengeance. It's happening. Now, what lesson should we take from verses 4 and 5 of this chapter? Verses 4 and 5.
Come out.
The same cry that was made to Israel, come out from the nations.
Do you know that cry has been made to us? 2 Corinthians 6, 14 through 7:1. And do you know what we debate about that? Well, Paul said we had to get along in this world. Otherwise, we'd have to leave it. But here it is again. Come out of her, my people, lest you participate in her sins. And her sins are piled as high as heaven. And when judgment comes, do you want to be where the judgment's coming? Remember, the first bowl of judgment was poured out against those who had the mark of the beast. And the bowl was poured out on the kingdom of the beast. Is that where we want to be when that happens? So, does Revelation have anything to say to us? Yeah. Folks, I really understand how hard some of this is. It's easy to say these things. It's a lot harder to live them, isn't it? Yes, Shane.
One thing that I think is interesting as well is verse 14. It says, the fruit of for which your soul longed has gone from you. That's Genesis 3, the same kind of picture. And what we have to realize with all of this is that these are the temptations that are put in front of us. And the issue is not the wealth. It's all of these things without God. They're wanting the same things that Eve wanted. Is they want all these things. I just want to be like God. I want to have His power. And I want to do all of this without Him. And
I would actually say they want a God. They chose the beast. They chose themselves. And so we always have that choice to make, right? Which God will we follow? We're going to take a God that has a short-term benefit or the long-term. Now, I will say this. Paul said, godliness with contentment is great gain. He also said godliness has benefit in this life and in the life to come. I've always said I live a very boring life. I go home to the same wife, I worship God, and life, for the most part, is not so exciting. I don't want that excitement, just to tell you. But let's keep in mind what he's saying, though. So remember that we should rejoice when judgment comes, because that judgment will be at a time when God says it's time. Remember the end of Romans 12. Don't take vengeance for yourself, but remember, vengeance belongs to who? So when God decides to take vengeance, it will be true and just. We just need to wait for it. So, all right, thank you.